Good afternoon and welcome to the Self-Aware Entrepreneur Show. Today, joining me is the amazing Deborah Bulcock. She's a leadership coach, a nutritional therapist, a best-selling author, and more importantly, she's just an amazing person with a background, a story, a journey that's going to resonate with you, help you to understand some things to look out for, some hurdles that might come into your way, some barriers you might have to smash through, but more importantly, build some awareness around some of the challenges that we quite often face around corporate culture, around burnout, around stress. I mean, she's really a fountain of knowledge on everything from stress to resilience, from mindset to how our nutrition impacts our mental health. So it's absolutely my pleasure for me to introduce Deborah. Thank you for joining the show today.
Oh, Lee, thank you so much. And that's quite an introduction and a lot for me to live up to. But I'm really glad to be here. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And the amazing part is Deborah was due to come into the radio studio with me 6 months ago before lockdown 2 decided to shut us down. So this has been 6 months in the making. And what it means is that the anticipation and excitement has built up, which means I'm even more animated than I usually am. But yeah, it's a pleasure that you're joining us, Deborah, and you bring so much value to the show. So I'm really, honestly, privileged to have you with me today. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to at the moment, Deborah?
Gosh, what am I up to at the moment? So it's interesting, actually, because a lot of my work that I do is done virtually. Most of my coaching clients and coaching sessions have always been on Zoom. So that's been a little bit business as usual.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that the conversations that I'm having with my coaching clients are kind of really grounded in the impact of the pandemic and what that's meant for people, for work and for family life as well.
Yeah.
So right now, a really heavy focus on just supporting my clients in the very best way that I can. And I guess at the same time, just helping those companies to think about how to navigate some of the challenges that people are facing at the moment too.
Yeah, and you've got a balance between individual and organisational clients?
Yeah, I have. I have to say most of my coaching clients these days do come from companies. So the way I tend to operate is quite often, say, a director of an area in a big company will say, I want to support my team. How can I best do that? And we'll come up with kind of a program of activities, which might involve some coaching and a couple of workshops and, just some different activities to give them the support that they need. So yeah, I'd say these days, I'm really pleased to see that more and more businesses are supporting their people with some form of development or coaching support or just general kind of mental health support as well. And I'm sure you find that as well in your work. But as a result, that's where the demand is coming from. And I'm really happy to respond to that.
Yeah, and I think it's a trend again as companies become aware of both how well-being and learning and development kind of fuse together in that coaching culture space and creating those places for people to feel like they can either develop themselves or promote their own well-being and have a little bit of autonomy to do that. But that support, that kind of sounding board, that external advice is really, really powerful. And I just feel that as things gradually open up, it's a real opportunity for organizations to consider just how valuable it can be. But we've spoken often, Deborah, about the power of coaching, about the realities of being ambitious and finding ways to channel that. And what I want to know is, Deborah, what were you like when you were younger?
Oh, what was I like? Oh, what a question. Depends how young you want to go. So I think I was always ambitious. I always wanted to strive to be better. It's funny, I don't consider myself overly competitive. Some of my friends might say different. Unless Monopoly's on the table, then, otherwise I'm not. I'm kind of more about everybody winning together.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to better myself. So I was the first in my family to have the privilege and the opportunity to go to university.
Yeah.
And then kind of, it's funny in a way because my career just happened. It wasn't necessarily planned.
Yeah.
But I sort of fell into my first job from university and then it kind of just took a life of its own. But yeah, when I was younger, I guess I've always been fun-loving. Always had some confidence challenges which were a little bit hidden, and
Yeah.
that's really relevant to what we're talking about today. So it didn't stop me being ambitious and pushing myself forward, but it did come at a bit of a cost to do some of that. And I'd say that's been present in my life ever since I was a child. That kind of quite heavy self-doubt, and things that went hand in hand. And, for a lot of people, when you've got some real self-doubt and confidence, you kind of sit in the shadows. And that's, where you prefer to be, where I was still saying, no, I'm just going to get hold of this and really try and push forward with it.
Yeah, and obviously, you managed to go to university, have the privilege and the precedence of being the first one in your family to do so, and that's something that, I experienced as well. And for me, it actually led me to, find university quite challenging, because didn't really have that support network. But you obviously managed to come out from that, and really, despite having some of these challenges that you probably, when you reflect on now, it feels a little bit more kind of tangible. But at the time, you were obviously, really trailblazing and making inroads into building a career. So tell us a little bit more about how you kind of built that career and, elevated yourself into levels that many people don't experience.
Yeah, I think I would say that through my late teens and 20s, I really thrived, actually. So even though I did have lots of self-doubt and confidence challenges and some of those things going on, I was really loving life.
Yeah.
So I kind of did my undergraduate degree, then I stayed on and did a postgraduate degree. So I did a master's, and then I got a job in financial services. And it's interesting because it's not necessarily an industry that excites me when I talk, when you think about the products, but actually it's a really important service for people. And I just worked with some truly amazing people. So, I've formed some of my deepest friendships through my work.
Yeah.
And through my 20s, I just worked hard. I applied myself hard. I was really, really interested in development and kind of learning new things. And I always had a mentor and work through. And in one sense, I kind of look at my career in my 20s because I just climbed the corporate ladder really quickly in my 20s.
Yeah.
So before I exited my 20s, I was at a really senior level. And arguably, I'll look back now and think, was that all a little bit too soon?
Yeah.
But at the time, I was just absolutely loving it. I was getting results. And my real specialism, I guess, in that environment, I was good at taking on, a really challenging piece of work that had a finite lifespan to it, involved change, involved really bringing people on a journey and getting it done. So what I tended to find was every 12, 18 months, at the most 2 years, I was in a new job.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of have a significant project, I'd see it through, and then I'd be on to the next thing. And for me, that promotions came with that as well. And it came quite easily to me. And what I found is that I gained a lot of my self-worth through that work, through the promotions that went with it, through kind of the recognition. And I just threw myself into it. A 60-hour week would have been a short week working week.
Yeah.
But I loved it, and I just really, really went for it. And I played hard as well. So I worked hard and I lived life to the max.
Yeah.
And I kind of look back with a real smile on my face going, gosh, I was absolutely loving life, and kind of riding the crest of a wave in a way. So that was kind of going on. And it wasn't until my 30s that some of the cracks started to show in terms of my health and what things were looking like. But that's kind of like what work felt like to me. So I've always been in this, in the field of change and transformation. And my passion from the very beginning of work has always been about developing people. Yeah. And I'm definitely a leader who gets results through people. I'm not someone off out there at the front with the most strategic vision and mindset. I'm more around, right, where are we going and how do I get everybody there with me? That's how I've always been.
Yeah, and that's such a valuable skill set. And I mean, even for me, who started his career in financial services with a co-op bank, and if you kind of look where I am today, it's that very similar understanding that, yeah, I had a natural affinity for data, statistics, assessing risk.
Yeah.
But what do I actually enjoy? It's empowering other people, enabling transformation, really kind of encouraging people to move forward, because there's lots of advice in the world, but sometimes not enough encouragement and support.
Yeah.
So let's kind of look into a little bit into how those cracks started to appear and how did they kind of manifest, and what did they actually then lead to for your own journey?
Yeah, so I would say it's funny because I can look at, I'm in my late 40s, so I can look at my my working career in decades.
Yeah.
And in my 20s, I would say it was just all this kind of, like I've described, this upward trajectory and just loving life and thriving and living life to the full.
Like a rocket.
Yeah, absolutely like that. And I was in a way, I was a bit unstoppable. But what I found is that as soon as any self-doubt creeped in, the way that I addressed that was to probably just to work harder.
Yeah.
Or please others in some way, shape or form, whether that was like with friendships or at work.
Yeah.
So as I kind of went into my 30s, that I guess the work journey continued. So no one else really knew that the cracks were starting to show.
Yeah.
But what started happening for me, probably quite kind of going towards mid-30s, was that I just started to find that whilst work was okay, I struggled to have a life outside of work because I was tired.
Yeah.
So I'd find that I got home from work and I didn't really want to, whether go to the gym, go to the cinema with a friend, meet up with somebody. I just it started off by me withdrawing during the week. Going, I'm just going to preserve my energy for the weekend. That's what I need to do, and that's what people do. That's fine. And then it started to be the case that I started cancelling plans at the weekend because my energy was low, but I wouldn't say I had low mood, but I just had a level of apathy.
Yeah.
So it was just a real struggle to get going, and I felt sluggish and I started having a little bit of brain fog. And because work had become so all-consuming for me, what happened was that my evenings and weekends just became about recharge time.
Yeah.
So it's just like, these days, just plugging your phone in. So it just like the batteries ran flat by Friday. And then I just kind of try and build myself up again.
Yeah.
And the way that I describe it, if I was to kind of draw a graph, you think each week that you recharge, like each weekend, I thought I was recharging my batteries.
Yeah.
But what was actually happening over time is that trend was going down and down. So I was never full.
Yeah.
Again, and then I got to a point, I can remember me saying this, and I know people who say this today, but I absolutely had to have a holiday from work every 10 weeks. So if I went more than 10 weeks without a long weekend or something in my calendar, I knew I would fall over. I'd just feel really, really unwell. And that's what started happening. And it just gradually got more and more severe to the point that let me think. So it happened in 2012. So kind of the end of my 30s, if you will, and I can tell you this in as much detail or not as you want, but I got to the point where I say I hit rock bottom from a burnout point of view.
Yeah.
So what I was describing then, just imagine that just kind of getting gradually worse and worse, and ultimately me withdrawing from life.
Yeah.
And I did go to doctors and different complementary health practitioners to kind of go, what's going on? I don't understand. I had all of the tests.
Yeah.
Everything's normal. There's nothing wrong. We can't see anything wrong. And I just became quite isolated as well because friends got fed up of asking me to go out because my answer was typically no, or I'd end up cancelling at the last minute because I just physically couldn't move myself to do things. So it was a really tricky time. But yeah, kind of February 2012, I remember it really starkly, is when I say I experienced burnout, that rock bottom.
Yeah, and I mean, we obviously speak a lot about burnout. It's becoming more prevalent. There is more awareness around it, but can you just like explain a little bit about how? Because from kind of my research, my understanding, burnout is really a feeling of deficiency. It's a feeling of nothingness in so many ways. It's literally when, and like we're just speaking about, recharging. We all know what it's like when we buy a new phone. And it charges really quickly and it holds a lot of charge. 2 years down the line, it seems to die before the end of the day.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy, Lee.
Yeah, and we're kind of running in a similar way where there becomes a point where, if you turn our screen brightness up, the intensity grows, our batteries just deplete so much more quickly. But yeah, can you explain a little bit about that, that feeling of not enough?
Yeah. And interestingly, I will say, so burnout isn't yet considered a medical condition. And I believe it will be at some point in time, because it's different to depression and it's different to chronic fatigue, what have you. And the way the World Health Organization define burnout, they refer to it as a workplace syndrome.
Yeah.
And I actually wholeheartedly disagree with that, because I don't think we can be something at work and not something in life.
Exactly.
So burnout for me is a whole person experience. And, the really common things that sit with burnout and with me are obviously significantly depleted of energy. And I'll talk about the extent of that in a minute. Kind of a sense of defeat, and your self-worth kind of along with that. So there's some real mental health things that go with it.
Yeah.
But then there are kind of other things that go with it that can be a bit individual.
Yeah.
So for me, if I describe, this is the moment I remember really, really clearly, is I'd come in. So I lived in South Manchester at the time. I'd been to work and I got the tram to work, and I'd about half a mile from the tram to my house, and I'd kind of walk down the road and I was just like going, can I do another day? Can I actually keep on doing this? And I walked through my front door. I was in a Victorian terrace. Stairs were ahead of me. And I just didn't even take my coat off. I just sat on the bottom stair, and I physically couldn't move. I was just absolutely done in. And I didn't go back to work for 3 months from that point. So what burnout looked and felt like for me was, because I think people use the phrase burnout when they're tired. So we can all be tired, and I think that's quite natural that we have ebbs and flow with energy and with tiredness. But burnout is literally when your body says, that's it, no more, I am stopping you, you cannot carry on.
Yeah.
So for me, kind of burnout was the point at which I couldn't get out of bed. My body hurt from top to bottom. So I can remember saying my bones ache.
Yeah.
I just felt that I had brain fog. I couldn't think. And once I acknowledged that I wasn't well, so there's a real kind of mental part of this. Once I acknowledged I wasn't well and that I needed to look after myself, it was like everything just collapsed. In a way, because I'd just pushed on through for so long. So I was no longer pushing on through. I was employed at the time. So my employer was very supportive, and I took some time off. But it was the start of my journey, to something else I'm doing, because whilst I was off, an opportunity came up for voluntary redundancy, which I took. It's funnily enough that you mentioned the co-op, because I was working at the co-op at the time, Cooperative Bank. And that kind of, it just, again, I felt quite lucky that had happened, because it gave me a little bit of breathing space to work out what I wanted to do, and why I wanted to do that.
Yeah, and it became the igniting reason, the powerful why, the compelling vision behind the work that you do today. So do you just want to expand a little bit on how that journey came from, being sat on the bottom step to now being the person who is there so people never end up on their bottom step?
Yeah. And that is absolutely what I'm about. So a lot of soul searching that summer, and I also worked with a coach. So I took on a coach to say, I can't go back to what I was doing. I might have to go back to it for a period of time, just to kind of financially get myself through and set up on a new journey. But the first thing I decided to do, because I would say it was natural health, that a real focus on natural health and nutrition, and I worked with a naturopath, that got me back to health.
Yeah.
So as much as traditional medicine is brilliant for so many things, it had no answers for me whatsoever. And I've always been interested in nutrition. So I decided to train as a nutritional therapist. So what I ended up doing was part-time consulting in financial services, 3 years back at college, training to become a nutritional therapist. So I did that, and that was kind of one of the best 3 years of my life, met some amazing people, and it was really liberating for me to do that, and empowering, because I was setting off on a different path. And then when I finished that, I then started to think, well, what am I going to do with this qualification now? And I'd already done lots of coaching qualifications in the past. And I just decided to put those two things together in terms of, how many people, I could support by bringing together the health side, kind of all of my corporate knowledge, working in the corporate space, as a senior leader, and everything that comes with that, along with helping people. And I don't, I'm sure you've had this experience, Lee, but as soon as you share your own story a little bit, so as soon as you've kind of got the courage to open up and say, this is what's happened to me, this is what I'm doing about it, and you want to help others, people are just drawn to you. So there's so many people who talk to me about, I've experienced that, I felt really lonely, I didn't know what to do. I've somehow got myself back to health, or I'm feeling like that now. And it's one of those things that's just not visible to people. So I guess, sorry, I know I'm going off the tangents, but I guess I'm just saying that from that point, it did really ignite something in me that says, this is not right. I've got to change things for myself first and foremost, or I didn't think I'd be here very much longer. I kind of felt so unwell. So that was my priority. But then it turned into, do you know what? There's loads of people experiencing this same thing in a very isolated fashion, and surely I can do something to help them. And on a bigger scale, lifting it up, the impact that's having to business is huge, and they don't really know about it. So, the productivity and creativity and like commitment and loyalty and resilience, all of that's being lost in an organizational setting is just huge, because people are on their knees with exhaustion. Largely driven by the amount of stress that they're experiencing on a constant basis.
It's really interesting. And obviously, from a health and happiness perspective for individuals, it's absolutely pivotal. But from a business KPI perspective, there's not really a KPI that burnout doesn't impact. And it's got a rather compelling business case when organizations are more aware of its impact, how it manifests. And obviously, for me, working in the wellbeing space, and yourself as well, what often gets forgotten is the processes and the culture that generate that stress, that generate the conditions for people to not really be able to engage in well-being or even be in a well position to begin with. And that's so often kind of missed out on that well-being journey, which is where you kind of stood into. And it's very true that when you turn it into your story and your journey, it magnetizes people in, because it's not a condition, it's not a statistic that's listed. It's a rich experience. And like we've spoken about before, for people with that lived experience who are vulnerable and sensitive and open enough to share that story, who've then gone on to build around that story expertise to be able to help other people while still being of a supportive and empowering mindset, not being the expert, but being the ally. And then having thought back to our previous experience and realizing that in a business context, having industrial knowledge, having knowledge of how things work, business processes, the ability for us to bolt on some of these, developmental aspects onto business processes can make a massive difference, because it doesn't feel like it's shifting the sands and, really completely bringing something new into an arena that's already established. So I just want to talk a little bit about your book, Deborah, because this idea of having it all without burning out There we go. So go on, tell me a little bit about how we can have it all, but not burn out in the process.
Yeah, so I wrote this book back in 2019, and I thought long and hard about the title, in terms of like, what are you trying to achieve? And I was like, well, it is a self-help book, it is absolutely that. Yeah. And I do share my journey in it. But I guess the reason behind the title and the whole philosophy is I think a lot of people are burning out because they're following someone else's dream.
Mm-hmm.
So they're following society's version of success, like whatever that looks like. And that's what I did. So for me, promotion in a corporate setting was success. And that's kind of what I really hung on to. And I got, my family were happy about it. Everyone was happy about it.
Yeah.
And what I tend to find is that, and I kind of don't mean it in a bad way, but we go with what we know.
Yeah.
But when you really stop and say, what is it that truly brings me joy, really makes me happy, creates a sense of fulfillment, gives me passion and energy every single day.
Yeah.
It's usually something a little bit different.
Yeah.
When I talk about having it all, I always say the way to have it all without burning out is truly knowing what your all is.
Yeah. That clarity.
Yeah. So kind of knowing what that is, but then knowing yourself well enough to know what your like self-care regime needs to be, like know what energizes you and what drains you, which type of stress you really thrive on and which type of stress is damaging to you. Yeah. And that is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of what I talk to organizations about as well, because stress itself can be motivating and a performance enhancer and all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
But it is different for everybody. And if it goes on forever, then we know the implications of it.
Yeah.
So my book is kind of, it's a focus on, look, this is what happened to me. This is my experience. And I'm really open about those things. Shared stuff that no one knew other than me. In there. It's a bit of a revelation to some friends and family. But then get on to, how do you work out what your all is? Like, how do you create joy in your life? And then I talk quite a bit about nourishing yourself. So tuning in to yourself and knowing yourself in such a way that you can choose a recipe or a formula of, these are the things that do recharge me. These are the things that keep me well energized. These are the things that keep my health where they need to be, etc., etc., etc. And in a way, it's like a whole menu of options and suggestions. But the message is, only you know the answer.
Yeah.
So it's not, I am not one of those people who says you must do X, Y, and Z to feel well.
Yeah.
It's about what makes you feel well, what makes you feel vibrant every day. And then how do you go about integrating that into your life?
Yeah. And that's the self-awareness piece that, is so pivotal, not only to this show, but to anyone who's looking to set up a business, anyone who's in a leadership position. In fact, anyone who's on a journey in life, which, funnily enough, is everyone. And that realization, we're all bio-individual. There's an awful lot of advice out there, a lot of stimulation telling you to do this. You must wake up at 5 a.m. You must, consistently post on social media 3 times a day. There's a lot out there, advice, but really, we just take a moment to become more self-aware, find our kind of charge levels and be able to monitor them, realize that quite often things that we truly find fulfillment in are energizing activities or are not as draining as things where we're going against resistance because it's expectations set by other people, someone else's path, which naturally is sometimes like wading through treacle. But the real beauty is Deborah, that all the answers are inside of us already. And sometimes all we need to do is start to fish them out through building our self-awareness. It's always powerful to have a coach to probe you in those positions, ask you powerful questions and just give you some space to reflect. So, I really appreciate you sharing your story, Deborah. And can you tell us what's coming in the future? What's the next big plan for yourself?
Do you know what? I don't know if I've necessarily got a big plan. And this is all part of me looking after myself as well. So I've done lots of things to develop my business in the last few years. And I think the next couple of years for me are about consolidation. It's about really focusing in on my clients with the tools I've already got, continuing to develop myself, but actually making sure that I'm well in order to help my clients be really well. And let's face it, the last year has been challenging for all of us, in lots of different ways. But for me as an independent business owner, I have seen some old tendencies in myself because I've had to push myself really hard to keep things going and support people well at a challenging time. So for me, it's really about consolidation, looking after self so I can really look after my clients.
Yeah, and a wonderful message of sustainability. But the fact is, when you're in that place of energized charge, you can, pass a little bit to your clients and still have enough to ensure that you're living the fulfilling life yourself. So again, I really appreciate you joining us today, Deborah. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
So a couple of places. So deborahbulcock.com is my website, but I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. So those two social media platforms are my main ones. I can see there's a question come through in the comments, and I'll come on and respond to that after we've finished. I'll do that. But yeah, deborahbulcock.com is where you can find me.
Super stuff. So yeah, it's wonderful that you've joined us on this lovely afternoon as the rain has been pouring outside here in the Northwest.
It's fine here at the minute.
Oh, well, there we go.
So
but
only a few miles apart.
Only a few miles apart. And that's, that's that connection piece as well, because truthfully, we're only ever a few miles apart. But yeah, we'll be back with another episode of the show at 12:30 on Monday. And once again, thank you, Deborah. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Oh, thanks very much, Lee.